Welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben, and the video that I have for you today is something that I've wanted to release for many years now. It's the full-length interview from a sit-down chat and discussion that I had back in 2016 with my friends Yousef Awyan and Mohammed Ibrahim. Between the two of them, these guys are experts in the ancient Egyptian civilization, in their language, stonework, architecture, and in the history of discoveries that have been made in this fascinating place. We get into a lot of topics during this discussion, things like the challenges inherent in building the Great Pyramid, the architecture of the Bent Pyramid, quarrying granite in the Old Kingdom. We look at some of the contradictions in the story and timeline of ancient Egypt, as well as the evidence for advanced tool use and the possibility for a lost ancient civilization once existing in this region. We also explore some of the Egyptian legends of their precursors and how the ancient world was connected. We also get into the authenticity of the Gosford glyphs and the evidence that the ancient Egyptians were seafarers who likely travelled much more extensively than we ever thought possible. As I said, this was filmed back in 2016, and I've used some parts of this in various videos over the years, but it's something that I've always wanted to release on its own. I do want to mention that Yousef and Mohammed don't work together anymore. Mohammed is running his own company called Guide of Egypt, and of course Yousef works for the Kemet School, who I partner with to visit Egypt on a regular basis. This was filmed by myself and my friend Luke. You'll hear both of our voices in this interview, and I've taken the time to spice this up with a whole bunch of footage of the areas that we're talking about. Before we dive into the interview, a quick reminder about a couple of the trips that I have coming up. In September this year, we're going back to the Scablands with Randall Carlson. Also, the Snake Bros and the Grimerica guys will be there. These are great trips, a lot of fun looking at the evidence for cataclysmic Ice Age flooding being taught by Randall Carlson himself. These trips are always just a great time, staying up at Soap Lake Resort there in the eastern Washington state. We have two trips happening from the 19th to the 24th of September, and then from the 26th of September to the 1st of October. You can find all the details about that at contact@thecabin.com, and there'll be a link below in the description. Also, I wanted to let everybody know about another opportunity to visit Egypt this year. Some of you may know that I have a trip scheduled for November. That sold out fairly quickly, and in recent discussions with Yousef, he invited me to come with him on his October trip called the Primordial Egypt trip. It runs from October 6th to 19th. I've just made the decision to accompany him on that trip, so if you couldn't get onto the November trip, or if you're keen to visit Egypt this year, I will be going in October as well as later in November. It's going to be a fun trip. It's very similar to the trip we've got planned for November. It's not exactly the same, but you can find all of the details for that on the Chematology website. There's a link to that trip down below, and it runs from October 6th to 19th of this year. And lastly, before I let the interview roll here, I do want to extend a huge thank you to everybody that supports the channel, to all of my patrons and supporters, channel members, subscribe star people that support my work through the value for value model. I really couldn't take the time that it takes to produce and make these videos without your support. It's very greatly appreciated. And if you're interested in supporting the channel through the value for value model, there's lots of ways to do that. They're all outlined on my website. It's unchartedx.com/support. I hope you enjoy the interview with Yousef and Mohammed.
So let's talk about the building the Great Pyramid, for example. In order for the Great Pyramid to be a tomb, it really has to be built very quickly. 20 to 40 years. That's what sort of orthodox, Egyptology tries to promote. So let's talk really for a minute or two about the logistics, the reality of cutting the stone, moving it.
In a minute or two?
Well, no, it takes a long time.
In a year or two.
Yes, right.
Building the Great Pyramid has more mysteries than anything else. From the beginning to the location, to the use of it, or the reuse of it. Every challenge, almost every challenge in the pyramid structure is a mystery. So even officials will never tell you that he has a theory about building the Great Pyramid and he's 100% positive about it. Because
we have hundreds of books about the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
Not about the civilization itself, but the Great Pyramid. And we studied so many theories how they built the pyramid, and in the end of each theory we say, but that is not possible according to logic. Especially the theories of building ramps, straight ramps, or round ramps.
Big subject.
Each, when we reach the level of having blocks weighing more than 70 tons, the theory of the ramps will not fit. But it fit if we have only the blocks 1.5 tons, 2 tons, 3 tons, but then we will face the blocks in the so-called king chamber, 70 tons and more. So one of our famous doctors, he was a physician, but interested in mythologies and supernatural things, and he used to give like a TV program every week called Dr. Mustafa, and he actually talked about the Great Pyramid, and he said the only way to push or drag the 70 tons block up to that level, we need a very solid concrete ramp. It was a very, very long measurement, and to have the smooth angle, and so we can drag or push that block smoothly to that level. So
on rollers from steel.
From steel.
Yes. To handle the weight, but a ramrod from mud brick and wood, that's gonna sink.
Never happen. Yes.
But the slide shape can take. But let's put in mind, 70 tons on this level. Then when you change the angle going high from straight, it's not going to be much more than 70 tons. We have lots and lots and lots to say about that subject. But he also suggested another thing, anti-gravity. He also talked about anti-gravity. My father also talked about anti-gravity.
Because, I mean, logistically, you cut the stones, you're bringing them from very far away. And what I didn't realize too is you had to bring them on the river, so there's the problem of tides. Can you talk about that?
Well, if we look at these, just these elements, how many different types of stones, how perfect the alignment, how big the structure is, what's the weight of the stones, what's the amount of work in the bedrock. We're not talking about any function, we're just looking at how it was built. So first you need to study this project. You're not going to just, I'm going to build a pyramid.
I need this.
You know, yes, I'm just gonna keep building, but the angle is like they say about the bent pyramid.
It's not accurate.
Yeah, but let's focus now maybe on the Great Pyramid and leave the bent pyramid for later. So you have work in the bedrock that needs to be accomplished. Huge amount of work, not just in the pyramid, but in the pyramid complex. You have like the middle pyramid here in the Giza Plateau, the one labeled as Khafra, and you can see, for example, the wall that surrounds it is all from the bedrock itself. So 8 meters of rock were lowered all around the pyramid. You can find, I'm not going to talk even about the pyramid structure, but what surrounds it. You can find in the bedrock 3-dimensional figures made to house what if we can call it the tiles, but they are also shaped in a puzzle shape to interlock with each other. And we have seen, of course, all those who have seen like how sharp this is, that you cannot in many cases fit a razor blade in the
so this level, even before they start building the pyramid itself,
they
still didn't talk about cutting the stone and start building the pyramid. That shaping the base, it's a challenge, especially in the second pyramid. As Yousef said, they had from the back side of the pyramid, which is the west side, they had to cut 8 meters down and to take the stones and put it on the east side to make it higher level, to balance the ground and make it horizontal level, because it was like a sloping angle, the original shape. So they had to lower part and higher part to make it horizontal level. Okay.
These other slabs Muhammad is talking about, some of them at least weighs 100 tons or more. So we're not just talking 70 tons in the pyramid structures. Maybe 70 tons or between 60 and 70 tons are the granite pieces in the so-called King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. But the other ones in the foundation of the middle pyramid, you can easily think it's the bedrock, but you can see they are like more than 1 meter high, and they are like some of them is like I wouldn't at least 3 meters something.
4 by 4 and 5 by 5 and 8
3
by
by
8.
5,
Yes.
Right outside
4
the
by
palace.
5
Yeah.
in front of the, and then they had another layer of the other style, as if they built part of the mound. But why not move with it back where you have enough stone foundation, and instead of building the rest? And this way we will never stop having question marks. So not just have it to look for an answer. Huh? Like you can look at the challenges and what are they thinking. The other thing, like when they talk about how it was built on different phases. First it was this, and then this was supposed to be the burial chamber. But then no, the king or the engineer changing his mind, and all these explanations. Where is your solid evidence about this? Is there?
Because who can change a design of such work? From day one when they start building, the design was ready and every detail was ready, because they are dealing with massive blocks. They cannot, it's not just a small break, they can destroy some and rebuild the other. Okay.
Incredible precision
Yeah.
too. It's not just the
Exactly.
And by the way, back to the second pyramid again, there is a piece in the so-called mortuary temple. We measured that piece 14 meters long and about 2 meters high and 1.5 or 2 meters wide or thick.
Wide.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the strange thing that this piece will not be seen. It is between a layer between 2 granite blocks.
Yeah.
Okay, so
If
that
we can
that
call
is
them
the inner
casings.
part from the wall. So why they brought that piece
Is it easier to move with a bigger block? I don't think
14
so.
meters?
Some people think that. Or I heard it once. I don't know who can believe something like this. It's easier just to move with 1 block. What do you mean it's easier to move? Why wouldn't you do this today?
Because we
Why
can't.
we don't move with the 14 meters blocks? Because it's easier. Because it's not easier, of course. Everybody will look at that. And if you want to build a temple, just that so-called casing stone from granite was enough to build a fancy temple. But that wall that can be more than 5 meters wide for a mummification temple, made from different types of stones, granite, white calcite, quartzite, basalt.
That gives me a question. So at these megalithic sites, the ones that typically display the most massive architecture, one of the things they have in common are the different types, or the same types of often very hard stones. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the types of stone that you find at these sites and maybe what you think their purpose was.
That's another
and
challenge.
Some of the things like the basalt.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. If we're gonna look at if we're gonna think that a primitive civilization will do something like this, then it was not supposed to be. There is no pyramids out there because it cannot be done. So to think copper chisels and things like that, that's definitely here it's a complicated point, but we cannot ignore it. What before I have a quarry system to bring different types of stones, quartzite, white calcite, basalt, granite stone, different types.
And each type required certain group of people,
Yeah.
certain tools,
Limestone.
certain treatment, because we are not talking about just cutting and shaving.
And shaping.
Yes,
And shipping.
and shipping.
And then raising. Every part is a challenge. It's not enough that the challenge, so they built it on top of a big mound. So they don't build it in the valley.
And I'm very sure that the ancient Egyptians were masters of geology, because when they deal with the stone, we can realize that they put each stone in the perfect location. They didn't actually put it randomly. They understood how this stone will survive, and I believe they were aware with the formation of each stone, like the limestone and sandstone is stones were made with pressure under the sea level. Stones like granite and basalt, what we can call it plutonic stones, or made by fire and under volcanoes. So each stone they made sure to put it in the right place. And like as an example, all the floors of the gates of the temples made out of granite, because they understood that this is always the place everybody's going to cross through this, when it will step above this. In my opinion, a piece of limestone will fit, but will not last a long time because of keep stepping with the dust and the sand.
Yeah.
It will be deteriorated easily. But they realized that they must put granite and not
in the foundation.
The foundation. Basalt and granite.
Granite is in the walls.
And I'm talking about the gates.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, only the gate. But the rest of the floor will be like alabaster or basalt, like the pyramid.
Oh yeah, under the gate.
Like you showed us outside Winnie's pyramid the other day. The alabaster, which you think is
Under the limestone.
stuff you would want to put on the top, is underneath the limestone. So again,
it's
it's
more functional than if you were bringing it for the decorational purpose.
right. So there's a function. There's a reason that you're putting the
Now you're gonna go to another mystery, which if this was not just a tomb, how did it function? And that's another mystery with many other elements, and we cannot jump into this without looking at how it was built. In my opinion, there are many things we can talk about it because it's interesting. Of course,
actually,
the angle, the alignment, all this is part of the function, the activation. But how can we skip building it, because it's gonna make all the difference?
I want to make a comparison between the ancient style you just mentioned and the modern style. Like nowadays, if you visit any of the high-class tombs, you will find that they have very nice pieces of alabaster, and they write the name and when he was born or passed away. Okay, so it is clear that you see the alabaster on the decoration outside, and that's why that tomb will be very expensive. If I'm going to buy such tomb, and they will tell me, look, all the decorations from alabaster, I'm going to pay a fortune for it. Okay, so if we go back to Winnie's pyramid, the alabaster is hidden, so it's not a tomb. Okay, because they don't show off like those people in modern time, or like even the Greeks, the Romans, when they built mausoleums, they wanted to show off, so they put all the alabaster and decorations to be seen, not to be hidden under a poorer material. Okay, I'm not saying poorer because it is bad, but in the modern logic, it's poorer. Limestone for us, it's not good quality like alabaster. Okay, so that's the question: why it is hidden underneath?
And in the Giza Plateau too, in the Valley Temple, there are huge slabs of white calcite crystal. Is constructed with, you can see it in the, of course, behind the wall of that causeway when you are going to see the enclosure of the Sphinx
on the ground.
Yes, and on the walls.
Now there's a lot of sites here. I mean, multiple sites where you have pyramids and structures around the pyramids that are the center, the core is the limestone, and then it's either flanked or encased by red granite, or in some cases by basalt, and the limestone in the middle is just, even though it's been protected for all these years by the granite or the basalt on either side, and then on top it's completely eroded away. It looks like coral that's been under the sea forever, and the red granite is fine. But in some cases, the basalt that's next to and still pressed up against that limestone is flaking away like the bottom of a burnt pizza crust. Now,
there are more than one story in this matter.
More than basalt, one. I mean, we mentioned it's a volcanic block, so it comes from lava. The other basalt that's not touching the limestone at this site's been in the sun for thousands and thousands of years. It's just fine. It's perfect condition. So what is happening at these sites to cause this stuff?
Here again, I think it's like a great jump to the middle of the mystery, while we are still far on the surface. But as I'm telling you, there are many, this was recognized. Okay, so depending on your study, you can understand, like geologists, for example, will have opinion, and that opinion would be that perhaps these limestone walls are much older, and then when it was deteriorated, it was renovated with the granite. But personally, I don't see this as a complete. It doesn't explain everything, that story. It doesn't explain the erosion, in some cases in the limestone, after it was shaped. And that also, this shaping, in many cases, was happening to interlock the granite with it. So that means the erosion or the stone eroded
Happened
after it was shaped to have the granite interlocking. And could it be the site, the other explanation that also if the site had active energy, and this bioenergy can affect the materials, stones and water and flesh and everything. But we don't have one science that contains it all. But it could happen. We have also mysteries of different stones, and we showed it to geologists, and it's a mystery. We don't know what kind of transformation happened, but in some cases we can be positive that it's not natural erosion, because in some cases the erosion is after the machining, and the core of the stone is crumbling, and the outside of it
Still in
is
good condition.
in a more solid condition. And in other cases, it appears to be natural, but it also, if that activation existed, it's not going to be natural, even that it looks natural. There is nothing mysterious about it, because probably it was transformed by bioenergy, and that's why you cannot find effect of something not natural, because the energy that affected it is natural.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Egyptologists actually recognize this, and they explain this in a, I will not say different way, but maybe not in a deeper way. They recognize that what we call it a sandwich style, the limestone in the middle and the two sides are granite. So they came up with a very interesting opinion, saying that this is playing as protecting each other. Limestone is protecting granite, and granite is protecting limestone. How? They say that the limestone is playing as a soft base for the whole structure, and it can easily, and listen to this, can interact with the vibrations. Okay, I will say later how they explain the vibrations. And granite will protect limestone from the weather conditions. Okay. But they came up with the explanation vibrations because of earthquakes. Okay, so they say that the whole structure will vibrate with the earthquakes, so limestone will not crack because it's not very hard like granite. So limestone will protect granite, not basalt. Granite is better material in this case, because granite will protect the limestone from the sun, from rain. So I think, as Yousef said, maybe yes, the idea is correct, but maybe the danger or the source of erosion could be something else, and not necessarily earthquakes, because we understand that Egypt is not located in earthquake belt, or there is no actions of earthquakes, and at least in the last 3,000 years, maybe 2 or 3 earthquakes. Okay, so it could be the activation of the site itself. So
Very,
that is
very
could be
important point that you brought, that you connected these two things. First of all, if we think that the ancient Egyptians did this to protect the limestone, then they were wrong, because they didn't protect the limestone. You know what I mean? But it's a very good point. And of course they didn't, because the whole thing is, you see. But Muhammad bringing a very good point here also to connect both of them. If the puzzle shape, if the interlocking stone and the, if we can call them tiles, around the pyramid were made to resist
The same
a
story,
vibration,
yes.
and this vibration is not the earthquakes, then also it was made not to resist the erosion. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like this was also not made to resist that kind of weathering. Or, yeah.
All these sites too, they're built on or around water. So that has something to do perhaps with energy and the moving of energy.
That's again to the subject of how it ran. In the case if it's not a tomb, if it had a different purpose, and using it as a tomb can be inheritors who reused a site like we have
as a tomb.
examples,
So that's
and
maybe a good topic is some examples of inheritance of how these, because we went and looked at many, right? We get lots of these different sites.
first we have to run out of the explanations of why the dynastic Egyptians can't build it. They accomplished and achieved a lot. So what's missing? Again, what's missing is the tool that cut the stone, and still not solved until today. So the idea of copper chisels cannot be right. Leave this one aside. Let's not argue about it because it's a done case, and don't bother with it. Maybe it's made out there just to take your energy searching for it somehow. But the the possibility of a harder stone conquering another stone, that's there, and many things were done this way. Many things, statues. Also, dynastic Egyptians constructed a lot. We are still not saying that they didn't build the pyramid until we ran out. So, where, as a stone carver and as somebody who researched this for a long time, where is the part here that's cutting the chain? Is that point when they talk about how the stone was not quarried, how granite stone and other types of hard stones were not quarried out of the bedrock. And that's of course explanation based on thinking that they didn't have the proper tools to do that.
To cut this.
Did the dynastic Egyptians have it? Did the pyramid builders have it? Had the ability to cut stones from the bedrock? I don't see any other way to think about this except that yes, of course, single solid pieces, 5 meter and 6 meter long. You can make 16 of them in an open court, all the same shape. All this reflects that those who are working with this granite stone, they have the power to shape it perfectly like this. And why you don't think they can hack it out of the bedrock if they can shape that it's the same granite? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can tell you why they came up with this story that they found the blocks. They didn't actually cut the blocks. Because according to scientific or historical stories, according to science, that till the beginning of Middle Kingdom, the dynastic Egyptians didn't use iron. What they used is copper. So the story of copper chisels actually didn't last the whole term, only the Old Kingdom time. And after the Old Kingdom, they started to have iron. Okay, but the question is, can copper cut granite like we see in the Valley Temple and we see in many places scattered like the pillars of Unas complex and around the step pyramid and in that area? No. That's why they couldn't imagine that, and Egyptologists, they understand and they admit that copper cannot cut granite. That's why they came up with this story that they found actually the pieces. They didn't cut this from the bedrock. They found it scattered around.
Yes.
Which is more weaker opinion actually than copper chisel. Okay.
Yes.
But going back to any granite pieces found later on, they was a clear conscience. They say yes, it happened because of the hammers and the iron chisels. But before or till Old Kingdom, no one can claim that they used something except bronze and copper.
So the
which is
official
two-
story says that all these types of structures with all these types of stones were made by people who were not able to quarry from the bedrock. Yet nobody achieved any structure as challenging as that structure. And on the other hand, Muhammad said also the official story of how they think that the civilization evolved in the Middle Kingdom and was able to quarry from the bedrock. Yet we have evidence, official evidence, that stone was being quarried from older sites in a wide scale in the Middle Kingdom. And you have the pyramids of Lisht, the pyramid of Senusert and Amnimhat in Lisht.
They reused
They found
older
evidence that the stone was once in all the kingdom structures, and I would guess it's writings in the backside of the stones.
Talking about repurposing and taking stones from one site to another site, let's talk just for a minute about the bent pyramid and the red pyramid and the Snefru, because one of the things that's really interesting about that is you know, they tell you that the bent pyramid is a mistake, and he decided he didn't want that one, he wanted a perfect one.
Yeah.
So my question with that is, why would you then finish the bent pyramid? Why wouldn't you just take that stone that you had already used, because you're bringing that out into the desert, all these miles, all this
far
huge-
away location.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
why wouldn't you take that stone that you'd already brought out here and make your new pyramid out of that? Why would you build a whole new pyramid where you're bringing the stones all over again from very far
Exactly,
away?
because we are talking about one location. If we are talking about two separate locations, we would say, okay, the king didn't like the idea of dismantling his pyramid or his tomb, which maybe became like an image or like a title of honor for him, and then he built another one in a far location to serve him as a similar function. But the case is that the two pyramids are very close, only 2-3 miles in between. Okay, and the idea of saying that the bent pyramid, a mistake happened, that is very strange to accuse the pyramid builders that they made such a mistake. Who can do half of the work if we will make it in two steps, that the base and then the second part? Who can achieve that perfect work with all the smooth layers and all the huge blocks? That is not a mistake, because they don't randomly choose the angle, or they are not like amateurs that they claim. And by the way, according to Egyptology, this is the pyramid number 3.
Yeah.
The step pyramid, Maidum pyramid, and the pent pyramid. That's why they said they were still beginners. So they couldn't understand that the angle is going to be so high, the edge will be so high, so they may felt afraid that the pyramid will collapse. Okay? And yes, why they didn't dismantle this and use the stones to build the other one? Why the puzzles themselves finishing this completely, or at least leave it? They would leave it and they start building another one. But they finished the bent pyramid completely, and all the corridors and the rooms from inside and everything, as if it will be used according to the Egyptology as a tomb for the king. And then they start building the second one. And the fact is, Maidum pyramid we just talking about, they relate also to Senefru or to his father or father-in-law, and he finished the pyramid. So how many pyramids the king have?
They were still practicing, and he finished 3 pyramids.
And this is against the story being a tomb, because why he built 2?
Yeah,
Okay,
Ah.
we're going to pause for a second.
cool.
Change the batteries.
My goodness, we cannot even start to talk yet. You know what I mean?
Let's
Yeah,
just
it's tough.
I'm going to plug in the charger.
We
Let's
cannot
just
start
switch
to...
to one.
احنا لسه ما استفدناش في اي
I have
حاجة.
a couple of extra.
Yeah, you want to just run that one?
We can just run this one if you want.
Yeah, do that. But we can keep talking. I mean, this is the audio recording. That's
Thinking that the bent pyramid is a mistake, you know, is a wrong conclusion, in my opinion. And nobody can prove that the bent pyramid is a mistake.
No, it's
Except that the rear angle in it, and that they relate another pyramid also to Senefru. So they think, did they find Senefru
No.
corpse in
Body?
never found Senefru.
Not Senefru, anybody.
Anybody.
Or anybody.
Yeah, never a mummy found.
So is Senefru, is that a person or is that a title? Is it a name?
But
or
let's
is it
talk a
title?
little bit about the pyramids. Huh? Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because the structure here definitely has more evidence and traces to follow than any writings or any symbolism,
Yes.
because that's the real thing you can study. So yeah, the bent pyramid was also studied by a group of researchers from and I watched that documentary from National Geographic, and the one of them, and this is one of the real wrong style of research, is to have the idea in your mind and go look
Before
for
you
the
study.
evidence
Yeah,
to
yeah.
support it,
Right.
not go study and then come out with an idea. You know what I mean? So his idea was simply, if I am building and then the pyramid started to collapse, then I'm gonna finish it, change the angle and do the casing. But in this case, to have the proof for his theory, he was going to find that the outside casing is straight, but the inner part is gonna be bent because it was falling on itself in the inside.
Yeah.
So they did the tests with the sonic equipment and stuff, and in the end it was straight on the inside. So he said no,
Yeah, it didn't
he's
work.
wrong.
Yeah.
But why do we want to focus that it's a mistake?
No,
It's the same thing like thinking the stones
Because-
cannot be accomplished because we didn't find it.
Again,
You have shortage in the data,
that's right.
and you want to explain everything based on what you have.
the same
Huh?
conflict of the copper chisel,
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's
which
like-
is if the bent pyramid is not a mistake, okay, and it is a tool.
Oh.
So
Why would he build another one?
exactly? Why was the need to build the red pyramid? You see how they put themselves in situations.
It's that circular logic of
Yeah.
we know
Logic.
that they couldn't have done this back then, so therefore that's the reason they couldn't have done it. It's
Exactly.
silliness,
Yes.
it's that circular.
That's we found nothing but copper chisel, so they must have had, and they could not quarry from the bedrock. The scoop marking that we see in the granite stone, in the third pyramid, and in many other, today in tennis we saw it, in many places. Any place that was left from the era of the pyramid builders, we will find this scoop marking on it. And these are the same scoops we see on the unfinished obelisk, or very, very similar
That's one.
to many of the scoop style.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the way from the side, and then it goes under the obelisk itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To have the same marking, the ones we find in the quarry. This is Zahir
Yes.
crying out there.
Yeah, it could be. It's channeling.
Anyway,
But you could talk about
to have the
that those
same
markings-
to have the same marking on the stone of the pyramid structure as the one we find in the quarry and where they cut stones from before, that I think is a solid evidence that they had the same technique, and
That's
the
whole
quality
pyramid stone idea.
the quality of the granite stone itself, very fine quality. So it had many geologists will agree to this, that it had to be coming from this kind
Deep
of
within the bedrock.
yes.
How far down?
We look at the test pits. Some of them are 11 meters deep in granite.
It's a test pit for that. You think they were testing the
Yes,
structure?
and that's why Muhammad was saying the ancient Egyptians were good geologists. They understood the how the veins and
What they are
everything
dealing
is
with.
running. So they know, like, if I'm gonna, he knows that there are natural cracks in the block. So where does this block? So now he's dealing personally with the quarry. So He sees the crack. He wants to know how deep it is from here, so he doesn't waste his work. But then, when something like this happened in one or two cases, why not cut it to a smaller pieces? He's achieving something. Why does it have to be from a single solid piece? If we have in the dynastic Egyptians in the Luxor temple and Karnak temple, the style of the pillar built out of many sections, and it survived for thousands of years. Why would those in the New Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom will go to the pillar style of many pieces, and they had the ability to quarry from the bedrock, and those who didn't have the ability to quarry from the bedrock will make it from a single solid piece?
Your question about how deep, you must ask first how long and how big.
Yes.
Yeah, longer means deeper, bigger means deeper.
Yeah.
And we reached the fact that at least they must dig under the ground level 14 meters to reach long pieces without cracks, especially limestone. If you visit the valley of the Kings and look to the area which is mostly limestone mountain, you will find in every 20 centimeters there is a crack on the stone, on the surfaces. So you must go deeper. And that is the case of the unfinished obelisk. When you go, you see it a little bit up above the ground, but actually it is in the middle of the mountain, because they cut the mountain from above. They at least 20 or 30 meters were on top of that quarry. So the obelisk considered from the heart of the quarry itself. And you saw it in a deeper level, actually.
And the style. The fact that when they are quarrying, they are not going to the side of the mountain and like what we do today. We do the pits today on the side of the mountain
from the
and
edges.
fill them with explosives and then blow part of the mountain. And then we break these pieces into smaller pieces and put it in the trucks and live with it. You know, nobody thinks of carrying 300 ton single solid piece because it's definitely harder.
Exactly.
So,
me coming here to Yousef many times, I used to see some huge trucks carrying. The truck was with the extra truck, each one carrying 2 blocks, no more than 2 blocks. Let's say each block 10 tons, okay, or 15 or 20. So the whole truck is carrying around 100 tons. 40, about 100. And I can see the tires are suffering and they are like expanding because of the pressure. And we saw many times on the highway, some of the blocks are thrown away on the side. So we asked what happened. So if something wrong happened to the truck, they get rid of the blocks, because risking or trying to take it back to send it to the location again or to the where it's supposed to go, it will cost them more money than they expect. So so it doesn't worse.
At the quarry there is a crane that's lifting these huge blocks to load them once on the trucks. And at the site of the workshops, the big workshops, there is another crane. So the cost of bringing the crane to the middle of nowhere and to just it's going to cost much more than that.
So imagine lifting the obelisk, which is supposed to be 1,200 tons.
Well, that's the next part. So assuming you can cut it out of the bedrock, I mean, pounding stone arguments aside, you then have to get it from Aswan to wherever your building site is.
Actually, no.
First you have to get it down the
This
hill.
is question number 3. To get it out from that location, just to outside the quarry.
Out of the quarries.
Yes, that is the biggest challenge to take it out, because
lift it up.
because if we deal with numbers, 1,200 tons. If we bring 1,200 persons, each one will carry 1 ton, which it doesn't make sense. So if we increase the number, 12,000 workers, each one will carry 100 kilograms, which can be okay for a short distance, but for a long distance, of course, it's killing. Okay, but let's stick with this number: 12,000 workers. Where is
6,000 and each
where
one
is the
will carry
location
200
that the 12,000 workers gonna stand together and carry the obelisk together? There is no room for 12,000 people. Maximum 200 people can surround the obelisk, and the edge is very, very slim. So there is no place at all, and they cannot carry, and it's up and down. Us going with visitors, walking with bare hands and
free.
have nothing, just a small bag. We suffer going to the obelisk. So how come the workers will carry that obelisk and will go outside?
Yeah. And the data they have, like when they made the movie about the obelisk and how it was done, this is a very famous documentary. You can watch it always in the unfinished obelisk side. There is So the data they have, we have how many people who was doing this in how long a time. This is all found in one of the tombs. Many tombs of the priests says like I working on two big obelisks and stuff like that. So we don't know if we can really depend on this data as a fact. Maybe they were just claiming these things for honor.
He made something great.
Or
Maybe they just needed beer and blankets.
But to be
The
honest,
beer
the man didn't give measurements.
was the
He used
elixir of
words. He said big, but they didn't give measurements. Okay, so because something big for me, it will not big for you, maybe. Okay, and from the tomb, we call it the Bershia tomb. They show how many people, like 60 people, dragging a huge statue.
Yeah, 60 tons.
But again, it could be an exaggeration, not necessarily to be a real thing. Yeah. Because us watched, we saw many cases in the sites, especially Elephantine Island, that the workers, 4 of them, were suffering pushing a block half ton maximum, or maybe less. Okay, on some tubes, iron tubes, not trees, because the obelisk, again, if you put that obelisk above 100 logs, will squeeze it, will make it like juice. Will not just slide above. No, will smash it in a second.
The slide definitely makes a difference, and the way it's shaped. But the dynastic Egyptians used it, but that's not
with that.
That's not enough to explain every challenge, especially when you're going up, when you're moving into the subterraneans, turning around, underground tunnels like the Serapeum. Who's gonna drag what down where in the darkness? And we have all this.
This is what they say about the satellite pyramids around the Great Pyramids. These were tombs. But how do you get bodies in there?
No, not all the officials say it's tombs. See, we have different opinions even in the official story, and that's a good thing, of course, because those who are honest, they leave a space for you to think and research. They know that the research is not complete. So, for example, I think it was Professor Ahmed Fakhri. He wrote about very important books about the pyramids of Egypt. And he said the measurement of some of these satellite pyramids is not going to fit even a wooden sarcophagus. So imagine who is going to go inside. Exactly. How can the priest walk inside? It's like something. The opening of it is like between 40 and 60 centimeters. That's all. So how are you going to even go inside and put a body or anything like that? So perhaps there were some cases that says other.
Yeah, very few cases that we found burials inside those little pyramids. And the famous case next to the Great Pyramid, the pyramid of Queen Hatshepsut. But another case like the small pyramid, the one they call it Menkaura, as Yousef said, the entrance is very tiny. I need a child to go inside. But human being like adult cannot go, and of course what we call it the funeral furniture will not go inside.
Yeah.
Okay, and the fact we didn't find anything in most of these pyramids, either the big pyramids or the small pyramids.
Yeah.
Okay, but again, it wasn't impossible, or maybe it was easy, that the reuse of the place. Yes. And this is, we found this case in Saqqara many times. So many of the tombs of Saqqara, we found burials from the late Egyptian time and the Greco-Roman time and the Coptic time, because it was easy. They found the tomb and no shame to put their relative, the father or the mother, inside, because they think it's holy ground and will be like free ticket to heaven. That is what the Egyptian believe. Yeah.
Many other things to talk about. Why cannot we depend on the scenes on the wall to explain everything? Because there are industries, scenes, agriculture scenes and things like
And
that.
daily life scenes.
And daily life scenes
Yes.
and activities.
In most of the tombs.
We have scenes of carving statues from the Old Kingdom. We have scenes of manufacturing vessels from the Old Kingdom.
Yes.
We have scenes of constructing from the New Kingdom.
Mm.
I'm talking especially about the tomb of Rahmira.
Rahmah.
And this is where they
The
got
West
the
Bank.
ram road
Tomb of
from
the
mud
obelisk.
bricks and that style, because this is actually the style that was used in dynastic Egyptian time. We agree to this. That was used to build the temples. They were built, as I told you, the pillars were built in sections. So every time they build a section, and they fill with mud brick, so they can
Add.
add another layer, and it's all based on evidence that was found. It's all gonna be rough, and then going down will be smoothing it and adding writings and stuff like that, going down again to the ground level again. So this is the style of the dynastic Egyptians, and it's documented and it's functional. Same like the agriculture scenes, same like the funeral furniture scenes, but not when we come, for example, to polishing and to cutting. There are tool marks we all been researching for a long time, and we know that is ignored. Nobody wants to look on it, but it is the technology of the builders. How can we ignore it and look at the other primitive styles? Because there are many primitive styles to deal with granite and the basalt, and that's how the people who came in the quarry used the site as a quarry. These are the styles they used. They didn't have the same tools that left the markings of the builders of the pyramids on the surface of the stone.
Specifically, these are the finished surfaces, the saw cuts, the
Yeah.
holes.
So we have the manufacturing the vessels. It on the wall. It looks functional.
Yes.
How they are shaping it, how they are drilling it manually, and how they are polishing it. But when you come
To the result.
to the artifact itself, then you
The result.
realize that not everything on the wall is explaining here, because there is a tool, we all talk about it all the time, called the tubular drill, that was used. It was not depicted on the wall. It was not found like the copper chisels were found. It was not mentioned in text, but it was used because we find the mark of it in the artifact. So
And we found the mark of the hand tool.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
the drill story Yousef talking about, that
Yeah.
they have the drill from maybe
branch with a piece of the cutting blade
the tip.
is a more to believe that it's a flint. We're talking about the manual style, because flint is solid, and
So we
have
found
flint
the jars can reflect this type of industry.
Yes.
That jar is found.
Yeah.
But another jar reflecting different
Yes.
tool, we didn't find the tool. And the tool can do this. It's not listed on the scene, or we didn't find the tool.
Yeah.
So as you said, yes, we
So-
cannot trust 100% that this is the whole story.
This
What
is
is
what
listed.
can be called the lost technology in ancient Egypt, as of course our friend and the teacher Christopher Dunn labeled his book, Lost Technologies in Ancient Egypt. And
He's done a lot of good work.
yes, if you can get him in your documentary, you are like 2 stars. Add 2 stars to any amount. If you have 7, then you have 9 stars. You know what I mean?
when Flinders Petrie found these tube drills and
Yes.
the drill cores that he
The
found,
drill cores was found cut out of slabs and cut out from core of vessels. Plus he found many unfinished vessels from rock crystal and from calcite and other types of stones, granite core from tubular drills, and he found in some, in many cases, the core of the tubular drill core is still attached to the unfinished vessel.
not
So
broken
this is a
completely.
conclusive evidence that this tool was
He
the
showed great
actual
interest.
tool for these.
Actually, he doesn't have 1 or 2 or 3 examples. He showed
No.
great interest in this, as if
Yeah.
he like to spend quite time collecting and try to study this kind of the tubular drill story.
Yeah.
Okay, but we didn't or we don't have a clear story from him about this, or maybe the writings is hidden or what.
About
the
from ancient Egypt or
No, from
Petri?
him, from Petri.
Petri,
No.
yeah, he also.
But he was
had-
honest to say we don't know.
That's
This
still
is a
the
mystery.
end of the 18th
Yes.
century.
Yeah.
That was in the end of the 18th century. So, like,
When
how much you expect he's gonna think of? He labeled it modern machining. That's an interesting
when they
thing.
found
Ancient modern machine.
when they found those drill holes in the cores, we can tell from the distance between the striations. You can tell the amount of pressure that's needed
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make each next striation.
Yeah.
So when he found those, there wasn't a machine on Earth that had
Doing
the
this.
same amount of power. Nowadays, yes, we do, but back then. So
Nowadays we do.
so what was powering it? How were they able to use more pressure than we knew how to use in the late 1800s, early 1900s?
Actually, this is can be a question for another thing, that how they smoothed the surfaces. When I went to the factory of marble, not granite, I found that they must have a big machine like this size, weighing from 2 tons and more, and then they have those polishing pieces, heads,
Yeah.
and they must press the stone with this heavy weight so they can polish the surfaces. But not like the show was a piece of stone and they do like this, that will be polished. Okay, that
Because
is no way.
this story was found on the walls. That's what they saw, the scenes, and then they explained the process of machining based on analyzing the scene. But when you analyze the artifact itself, you're gonna get the truth and nothing but the truth. We saw that the polished surface, for example, in the Serapeum was not done by nothing like the sand and the water and a piece of quartz or piece of hard stone, but we found also solid evidence that there was a liquid, a lay over the granite, not acid also to smooth it, but something that was laid, and it gave it that shiny surface. And we saw in the Serapeum how the liquid left a trace under the lid.
And not only this, but the man told me also there that those polishing stones, they had different groups, and there is number 1 group is erasing or polishing the striation, those marks, because if they use number 3, will give it shiny surface but still have the marks on it. So they have different heads, one dealing with the level, the big perfect horizontal, one deal with the marks to erase the marks of the saw, and one dealing with the polished surfaces, with the shiny one. Okay, so the piece of a stone will not cover all of these levels, and we still need that pressure, which is 2 tons and more.
Yeah.
It just occurs to me that some of this stuff they've written on the walls about how we did stuff could almost just be like, let's fuck with the Greeks or the enemies, whoever comes in. No, this is how we did it. What, you can't do that? Oh yeah, it's easy. This is how we do it. Just grab a stone. Give it a scrub.
Yeah.
But because like the column at Alexandria, which obviously has been repurposed from somewhere else. I mean, this is it's incredibly massive.
There's many other evidence of the Romans and the Greek recycling stones. Why should they bother go to the quarry and cut from the quarry if they can recycle something that was already there?
It's massive. It's circular. It's completely polished. The polish is still smooth and perfect after all
open
this
air,
time.
yes.
Yeah.
And the weather of Alexandria is harder than Cairo because of the Mediterranean, so it rains more than here. humidity is
Much
higher
higher,
than here,
yeah.
but still in a good shape. That is because of the liquid Yousef talking about. So that is the last step they do after erasing the marks and polishing the stone. They add kind of liquid, and I call it gives like a skin to the stone, and it protects the stone from any weathering or any tough conditions like this. So yes, it's still shiny, and Yousef he saw first those marks or leaking drops from the serapeum, from the stones. So that is one of the things they used, and that is an answer why the pillars taken by the Romans and reshaped by the Romans in a bad condition, more than the other types of stone, maybe in a harder condition, but still in a better condition, because the Romans, they chiseled that layer above the stone, so they exposed the inner skin to the conditions of the weather, so it became in a bad condition.
Many of the pillars with a shape that once you look at, you think it's Greco-Roman. We have it in Egypt. From for example, the shape of the pillars in area called the Bani Hassan. Once you look at it, you will think it's that style of a pillar where you have the grooves deeper from all sides,
Yes.
and that's at least Middle Kingdom here in Egypt, if not all the
Pure Egyptian.
Yeah, and many cases you can see that they took, and this is my opinion, they took the palm-shaped pillars from the ancient Egyptian structures, and they cut the crown of it and then reused it. In some cases also removed all the writings from around it, and this was reused and inherited and reused
Yes.
more than once, because in the latest layer that it was used in, we find this pillar in Islamic structures. Now tell me that the Arabs came here and went to the quarry and also cut granite and built the mosque with it. It's definitely recycled stone. And there is no doubt officials admit this, and they are aware of this. They are the ones who documented the Middle Kingdom reusing the stones from the Old Kingdom.
There's examples though of like Fourth Dynasty, etc. already recycling stuff. If it's that early and you're recycling,
That's a solid evidence. It's good because it's a clear evidence that stone was being reused. But I believe it's not the only case. It can be much more. And the fact because the relevant fact to this is that the scenes on the walls of the Old Kingdom doesn't show the capability of manufacturing these vessels, these tools, and there is also the circular saw, like the ones we saw in the unfinished books. Solid evidence. There is no doubt that there is a saw cutting granite stone.
And that books, by the way,
That
they
was
relate
never
to the
also
Fourth
mentioned.
Dynasty.
That was never mentioned in the scenes on the walls. There was no saw to cut stone, but there is a saw to cut wood. There are carpenters and everything, but there is no scene for cutting a stone with a saw for a box or anything. Everything is showing hammers and chisels and things like that. So
It's clear evidence of circular saw cuts.
clear evidence. And the Giza Plateau
Yeah.
and in Abu Sir, you can find
In the
that.
museum.
Yeah,
there is
and in the museum.
there is a stone at Abu Sir that's as large as a dining table, and the
Yeah.
entire top is just completely smooth, and you can see the circular tool marks.
Oh, you're talking about that basalt piece in New Surah temple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the edge, it almost curls over like a wave.
Yeah.
You can put your finger underneath it, and it's curling over like a wave.
Yes. This, and also the angle of the disc, when you look at it, if you try to complete a circle, then you're looking at 8 meters circular saw.
At the
8
Egyptian
meter
museum,
wide and around 4 millimeter maximum thick, that blade. cutting
Yes.
through basalt stone. Many theories were done about this, that it was a copper saw with a powder that has a harder solidness than granite and stuff like that. But this was not mentioned in the ancient times. It's a theory, and nobody showed me a demonstration to prove that it's functional until today. Because I think it was a fast process. The power tool, we have seen that it went deeper, and this is something I have to say, give credit to also Christopher Dunn. He's the one who taught me this, that the power tool will leave a deeper mark in the stone than what you are. Now I know this because I work with power tools, and I know exactly what this means, because I fall in this mistake sometimes when I'm cutting the outlines of a statue, and I go deeper with my power tool. Even when I smooth, I still have the, if I wanted to remove it, then I'm gonna destroy the scale of the piece. If I want to go all the way to erase it, so it has to stay in some cases. And this we see especially in the statues of Khafra, and also, which is the oldest. So
Yeah. Another box at the Egyptian Museum that the lid shows the same thing, the marks, but in this case vertical. So we believe it was a long saw, not a circular saw.
yeah,
And we can see the marks like moving from left to right level, and it is aligned one behind the other. So you
Yeah.
can easily understand that it was a very, very power tool.
Yeah, it'll stop after 20 minutes or something. It's alright. We have the audio
Yes.
recording.
so
We'll cover it.
yeah, you can
Yeah.
Yeah.
mostly use
We
the
missed the second.
no problem.
It's-
Also,
Yeah.
yeah, because we came to the subject that's gonna relate or not.
Yeah.
Hmm? The builders had that technology, no doubt, because the evidence we see on the stone, not on the scenes on the walls, but the marking of cutting the stone itself is reflecting what kind of tool was working. The scenes on the walls doesn't have it, but the statue that has the same style of art of dynastic Egyptians has it. Hmm? So
Can I ask the question and then answer?
of course.
Do you think?
Yes. Do you want to drop?
Do you think?
Please.
Yeah. Do you think that the original builders are totally away from the Egyptian dynasties, and they are
No,
different
that's
civilization?
exactly what I was saying.
And something
Because
else?
these lost technology tools, the marking of it is found on statues, and these statues
same
are with
style,
the
yes.
style of the ancient Egyptian civilization, the Nemes, the Cobra, the everything. Hmm? So we cannot separate it.
So it's
but
an
we're talking
early
about
stage of
the
Egyptian
era.
civilization.
Yeah, we're talking about that this era that they are studying, the old kingdom, the 5th dynasty and the 4th dynasty, supposedly they must have had this technology, because the pyramids in Abu Sir are from the 5th dynasty, and the Giza Plateau is supposed to be from the 4th dynasty. But nothing in the scenes and in the
The writings.
the writings or in the artifacts that was found in the tomb can show the tools that can create this.
Yeah.
So, did they have it or did they not have it? We can also, this part is really complicated, and this is the nut.
Right.
If you can, then you will see it more clear, which nobody can still see, even me or anybody. Because it's confusing.
Yeah.
There is lots of, we have again, I believe we have shortage in information. That's why more research need to be done. We have that, that's not everything. These tool markings are found also in artifacts from the archaic age
This is what.
and from the pre-dynastic time.
So
We have seen evidence, we have seen examples, sorry.
Go.
We have seen examples how artifacts was found in pre-dynastic burials, shows pottery vessels made by hand before having the concept of a wheel for the pottery, side by side with vessels made by ancient lost technology. How can this fit? There is only one way to have answer for that question, that this stuff was inherited from older
They found
time
it, yes.
that had this technology. And I'm talking here about the vessels.
Yeah.
The Quran
But-
bowl,
Many.
Russia,
My goodness.
Porphyry.
These vessels from the archaic age and from the
Granite.
pre-dynastic time are from different locations. Very special types of stones. Milky quartz, amethyst, jasper, calcite, granite, slate, porphyr, bercia, rock crystal. What else? There is others. There are other
especially
types of... Huh?
Slate, because if I can convince myself that they can do it, they cannot do slate. Slate is not very strong material. Okay, that's why if I'm using a hammer and chisel with slate, any extra pressure will break it.
Yeah.
And the challenge that most of the things made out of slate, very thin layer of slate,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
was wavy and like strange.
Very
the curves,
challenging
very
shapes.
challenging. It
Very-
needs, even with our modern tools, needs very precise tools.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are two types also of diorite gneiss used in these vessels. One of them is the darker green with the stripes, and this is the one that's found here in Egypt, between the borders of Egypt and Sudan. And the other one is found in Sudan.
Outside Egypt.
They reach it the as thin as transparency, for the light to come in. And in official books I read, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, but it's funny, because they said we don't know how the pre-dynastic man did this. Perhaps he discovered copper in earlier perhaps they discovered copper in earlier times than we think. But even copper we know we cannot do it. But they said we don't know, like the author said, we don't know how they did it, but we know that they did it with a happy heart because they were able to see through.
That's an achievement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our interpretation of the past in terms of the dynastic Egyptians and the pre-dynastic and the archaic age, that's our interpretation. It's not necessarily the way the ancient Egyptians even thought about it, right? Their
Exactly.
history goes back much further.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible that that's,
Mhm.
I mean, what they're writing is truthful, and they're describing the builders, the original builders, as part of that, the part where we call it Zeptepi, or where we describe it as myth on the king list or something. It might just be the ancient Egyptians saying, we know this culture was here. And
What
we
happened
talk about
that some people talk about the ancient Egyptian civilization and wrote books, and the famous case we have is Maniton or Maniton, the Egyptian priest who lived during the Greek time. That man wrote a book called Egyptica, and that book is missing and we don't have it. But someone called Abion, another Egyptian priest in Alexandria, he accused the Jews that they are the ones who made troubles in Alexandria and problems and burned the library. So another one called Josephus, he wanted to defend that story, so he said, I had the chance to read the book of Maniton, Egyptica, and he didn't mention the Jews, and he wrote a book saying this, so we lost that book. So his student, I forgot his name, he wrote a book about that book of Josephus, and that book is missing. So a priest, Coptic priest at the 4th century, he said, I had the chance to read that book, and he the one who wrote the book
Read
about
the book
the
that was
Egyptian
read
history.
out of the book. Yeah.
So how many books are missing? 5 books.
Yeah.
Or 4, and number 5 is the book we have. Okay? And Egyptologists are giving their own interpretation to the 5th book. Okay? Like one of the famous examples that according to that book, that Maniton, between the lines, he was talking to Ptolemy II, telling him that the first Egyptian king, listen carefully, was 26,000 before you, years. 26,000 years before you, my king. Egyptologists neglected this, didn't stick with this info. They took every information as a fact except that one. Why? They said he was exaggerating. He was trying to impress the king. Okay. In the same level, the Sumerian civilization, one of the writers mentioned something similar, that one of their early beginning was around 26,000 BC. Okay. And then we have Turin papyrus, the king list, and it shows what we call them the knitters and the followers of the knitters and Horus followers. They ruled for more than 30 years, 30,000 BC. And we didn't include the dynastic Egyptians yet. Okay, so those knitters and the first two levels of rulers of Egypt were beyond history, 30,000 and more BC. Okay, so Egyptologists, they put their own imagination in this and they choose what they want. And the fact is, there are, at the timeline, we feel it's not accurate. So many kings are not listed. So many kings are listed, but we don't know who are they, how long times they ruled, where are their locations. We found Seneb Kai tomb 3 years ago or less. So many names listed. Some names are missing from list to another. Mm-hmm. So the timeline could be longer than this, much longer. And what is Yousef talking about? That they start with the pre-dynastic and then archaic and old kingdom, and then the first intermediate period, that is maybe not the first. This could be the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth even.
Yeah.
Okay, and more civilization could be before this.
Yeah.
This might be a good moment to bring up Robert Shaw. Because when he initially, caused a massive sensation by, dating the Sphinx, he said it was maybe 9,500 BC, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I saw a video with him recently where he said he was now more comfortable with maybe 30,000 BC, but he didn't. When he initially talked about this, he was a little nervous about going that far. But having heard you say that, I know Hakim, he didn't like to talk about specific dates, but he would also talk about how the civilization, the history went back that far at least.
Yeah. Well, my father believed that the land, like the nation that was living around the whole river, and this is very ancient times that can go to tens of thousands of years, with many. It's not like looking for the right timeline now is the hardest thing. As you can see, we cannot even know how it was built, but to know that it's possible, that it's older than what we think. The entire civilization, not to separate it, was more intermediate periods. That's another good way to look at this. The fact that these vessels also were found in a pre-dynastic time with these artifacts we're talking about, side by side. And the fact that we have examples of recycling and reusing sites and material in the fourth dynasty itself, supposedly the dynasty of the original builders.
Right. They're already recycled.
And they're already. But about inheriting, there is no doubt that everybody, we can trace from the Islamic era to the Coptic era, Greco-Roman, late period, side period, New Kingdom,
We have a famous case in
Middle
New
Kingdom,
Ramses
all
II.
documented. It's not like something we're going to still have to research. That everybody was, some people like to call it usurping statues, and usurping statues is like also documented by official archaeologists and Egyptologists. And
Just like you were saying, Ramses II.
Yes, that's a
Really
famous
Ramses
clear
II,
case.
Yeah, Merim Betah is another famous name in doing this kind of work. And
And something important to bring to the subject, sometimes we date the erosions actually. We don't date the site itself. we did that. The story of Dr. Robert Schoch, he said that the erosions of the Sphinx could happen in a rain season around 9,000 or 10,000 BC, but this could be not the real date of the Sphinx itself. That is the dating the erosions.
Yeah.
So the Sphinx could be
That
much older.
There was a strong pluvial period around 11,000 BC where there's a lot of rain, but there was an even stronger one.
Mhm.
He was talking
Older
about
time.
thousands
Yes.
and thousands of years.
Yes. I believe, and of course it's better to get to Dr. Schoch on this to get the
Yeah.
exact data and where is he coming from. I believe I understood from him that 9,700 BC is when this rain stopped.
Yes.
That's what I believe.
After.
So it cannot be
After that.
after that because the
Right.
This is the minimum.
circumstances
Yes.
and
That's,
the
yeah, 'cause that's
weathering,
when the time of year
the
dried.
weathering, is not going to be happening if it's after that. And this is geology. And and of course, if it reaches that level, that's a timeline that is solid, in my opinion, because it's depending on something else, not dating and relating by writings. We can fall into many mistakes. We're not saying that it's totally wrong, but it's not totally right as well.
Exactly.
So to be fair, because some things are done in the dynastic time, no doubt. Most of what you see in Egypt. Look at the compare between the city first temple in Abydos and the Osirian behind.
Yes, right.
By mistake, many officials will date them both and relate them to the same era and the same builders. The levels are different, but under the structure, everything is in the structure. Shows without that this Osirian is made by the same civilization that created and built the pyramids, while the other one is known also to be dynastic. But the problem is we still when this one is. So we have that site that you've been talking about in Turkey.
Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah, and you said how old it was?
10,000 BC.
At least 12,000 years old, so 10,000 BC. right?
10,000 BC. And this is carbon dating?
Carbon date. They knew
Okay.
They knew it was actually deliberately buried about 9,000 BC.
Yeah,
That's how they know, because it was sealed,
yeah.
and so and they know from the structure of the rubble that a civilization actually deliberately buried it. It wasn't accidental. They actually.
It's
rubble
not
it. Yeah,
natural.
It's like it was closed down at that
I,
point.
I
That's
didn't
sort
go,
of
of
thing
course. I
happens.
wish to go one day.
Yeah, me too.
And I've seen pictures, and
But they still
Uh,
haven't excavated. I mean, they still.
I bet there is much
still
more
so
around
much.
it. Yeah,
Right now,
yeah.
they're still saying, "Oh, these must be temples," but they haven't excavated everything yet. So how they
Yeah.
can say what something is,
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
don't know. But
But it opens the door, right? It's because the biggest argument, the reason it's significant for Egypt, I think, is that one of the biggest reasons against Robert Schoch's dating of the Sphinx was that if that is dated to that period, then that type of megalithic work or massive structures, there should be something else on the planet, and that Egyptologists work.
With
There's nothing
global
else. There's
consciousness.
nothing corroborating this, so it can't be true. And Göbekli Tepe now corroborates it, because you have massive pillars, you have symbolistic
Circles.
architecture.
We
stone
have
circles and
something
megalithic.
also that is carbon dated, and I know that carbon dating is not very accurate, and I believe they do as well. That's why they give the range between this and that, and I like that, because usually when you're going back this far, you would say something between 12,000 and 14,500. So you give yourself 2,500 years range. This is the mistake, or like that not so accurate dating about carbon dating. But you wouldn't say the pyramid was built 2,551 BC, like,
It's a range.
and then lose entire dynasties as Muhammad was
In
trying
that
to
period.
mention. So we do have this pre-dynastic, prehistoric barrier in area called the Toshka. Probably it's flooded now with water, but probably. But they did these excavations, I think Americans did long time ago, and they have the photos in the Nubian Museum. So it is as official as it gets. And they say that they used carbon dating, the radiocarbon 14, for dating that site. And in this site they found also some of these vessels also. I have photos and stuff for it. and they dated the site with carbon 14 to between 12,000 and 14,500. This is not my data. This is the data done by officials, and the result of this research is displayed in the Nubian Museum in Aswan. So that's not my data.
This again takes us to a very interesting time period. When Ben and I were in Peru and Bolivia, we repeatedly had indigenous historians tell us that sites like Pumapunku and Tiwanaku were, in their estimation, in their belief, were 12 to 14,000 years old. That's what the indigenous people say.
The officials say that it was in the
2000.
It's only 800. Do you think it was done in the 13th century AD?
That's right.
And you can find a match between some of the structures there. And for example, the best example, of course, is the third pyramid complex here.
Yes.
Really matches some of the stuff. I was shocked when they said like the official timeline for this is it's not built like Machu Picchu or Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo, and they think it was only between 700 and 800 years ago, not BC, just 700 years ago, and it matches.
I want to give just a quick introduction to this part of the interview. In this segment, we get into the authenticity of the Gosford Glyphs. If you've not heard of the Gosford Glyphs, they're a series of Egyptian hieroglyphs that have been carved into some sandstone walls in a ravine located near Gosford in Australia. It's always been a fairly controversial site. I found it fascinating. I actually have a full video on the site after I visited it a couple of years ago, but Yousef and Mohammed have been involved in translating some of these glyphs, and they have a lot to say about the authenticity of the glyphs as well as the history of the ancient Egyptians actually being a seafaring nation that traveled the world. And I think they have a fascinating take on it.
You were telling me something, there was a guy who knew a lot, he knew 7 languages, I think you were saying, and he had something to say on that subject.
He's proving the connection, or the Egyptian language is the source of at least 7 languages, most of the Latin languages, and Arabic too. The hardest one for him was Arabic, because the Arab professors didn't like to approve until one of the very good professors, and he was my professor too, Dr. Abdel Halim Nuruddin, he approved to be his professor, and he the one who became like the one who made the exam for him and gave him the PhD with honor degree. Okay. And us too, we found so many words matching the English words, okay, like the word hour, like the word on top, like the word Deshret, desert, okay, very, very similar, or the same, okay. So yes, we believe the same thing, that the ancient Egyptian language is the source of every language.
When it's cold in English, we say burr, burr. Where does that come from?
You say it in English, burr?
Burr.
It's called
burr.
Ah, really? You say the same?
Yeah.
Like as a phrase for cold. Yes. This came from the Egyptian word bereret, means winter. Yes, bereret. So double R, so it gives the same sound. Yeah.
I think it's a normal reaction for human beings under the cold weather. You know, you do that normally. So you don't have. It can be something international, like the word mama from in all languages. Doesn't have to be from the same source, but it's the same. It is the same source, but not the same culture. It's not a part of culture, but it's a part of just.
But the point here that they make it as sound, but not as word. But the good thing that we try to prove that the Arabic language is like a younger brother to the ancient Egyptian language, or like a baby from the ancient Egyptian language. So the word pirate in hieroglyphic is bird in Arabic.
It's the same.
See, it's very, and it's a word, not expression, or not a sound. It's a word, means also cold.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why we strongly believe that Arabic is ancient Egyptian language.
Talking about languages spread out around the globe. You guys put a lot of time into translating and working on the Gosford glyphs, which, for those of us who don't know, are Egyptian glyphs that were found on a rock face in Australia. Can you tell us about how you got started, how you found out about the glyphs and decided to work on them, and what your conclusions were?
First, I want to say something before that about that other subject.
Yeah.
If the language itself didn't have enough studies to see the comparison and the things Mohammed was talking about, but the symbolism in these countries definitely was influenced by the ancient Egyptian dynastic symbolism, like the winged disc and other things.
Yes, because you see that in the Hittites, the Syrians, Babylonians. You see the winged discs.
Persians and
same style.
Babylonians. So definitely.
I mean, was it 42 tribes came out of Egypt initially?
The world was, in my opinion, more connected in the ancient times. The nations were more active together, trading and knowing the different traditions. Even from the pre-dynastic time, they used to travel more. There are many evidence.
There is a map.
And that will lead us to the Gosford glyphs, because it is about that same subject.
Right.
Because it proves that ancient civilizations traveled across the ocean.
Well, we've seen, you have showed us, you showed me, I think it was Titi's tomb, massive boats.
The tomb of T in Saqqara, and the Miraruka.
50 pairs of oars or something on some of these boats.
20 on each side.
What do you need that for in the Nile?
And a big sail. And in Hatshepsut temple there are sea-going ships, not just. We believe these other ones is too big also for the river, but the evidence of, and when we see the signs of a river or a canal, we only see the reed boats sailing, but not these bigger ships. In Hatshepsut temple there are sea-going ships with the creatures living in the sea, in the water, carved.
Thor Heyerdahl at one point, 30 years ago, something.
Exactly.
He sailed a boat all the way across the Atlantic.
We've been to.
This is what we said when we visited the museum. And we were wondering how come we can, at the whole world, we accept that he traveled all around the world with this boat, and they denied that the Egyptian can sail with what they call it the solar boat, which is 46 meters long, which is considered as a huge boat.
Almost 50 meters.
So
bigger than the
Christopher Columbus boats. Okay, so how come we accept this theory and we deny that the ancient Egyptians? And there is a fact happened that Hatshepsut sailed to an African country, Puntland, which we cannot specify where exactly, but it's somewhere like in the east side of Africa, or it could be somewhere else, okay? But she sailed. She took a whole fleet, not just one boat or two or three. It was a fleet we can count till 12 boats at least.
At least 12 big ships.
And they were big ships. It was a trading mission.
You can see lines, and then the lines on the walls shows like that it's not just one boat. There is line of boats, 3-dimensional.
I just want to add in a little bit of context about the stories of the Egyptians going to Puntland after some discussions with Yousef. After this interview was made in the years since 2016, there was a discovery made by Czech archaeologists in Abu Sir who discovered inscriptions and hieroglyphs that said that the ancient Egyptians in fact travelled to Puntland in the 5th dynasty, so it wasn't just Hatshepsut that went there. They also were apparently travelling across the oceans in as early times as the 5th dynasty of the Old Kingdom.
And
the ships went to Lebanon for the cedar wood from the early beginning of the Egyptian civilization.
And we saw in the Fayum period the cedar.
Definitely.
And that ancient map from the 1st dynasty shows many nations, and they call that the first or the oldest map of the world. Because nobody said that, but we can feel that this is Africa, this is Europe, this is North and South America, this is Asia, and there are at least 8 boats sailing in each corner.
Different style of boats. And the man with a boomerang
Yes.
This map is 3200 BC, official
And
timeline.
what do they say about the boomerang when you see it in
The
hieroglyphs?
foreigner's weapon.
Oh,
That's what they call it. Even that we have it from the old kingdom time in many depictions.
Labeled as
Many
foreign.
scenes in the walls.
They're in the
Foreign.
museum.
Yes.
Number
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah. And on the walls and known as Am'at. In hieroglyphics it's called Am'at. And also the other thing about Hatshepsut temples, the scenes shows like that these people, or like you will understand that these people, they didn't just sail once, because to document every creature that's sailing,
The
that's
fine details.
underwater
and
in the
accurate
sea,
details.
that means you know exactly
We saw
where
it
you're going.
hundreds of
You have
times.
seen this, big turtles and squads and different
Swordfish.
types of swordfish and many different types of fish. Everything is documented. So that means they will.
And the types of fishing methods that they employ.
That's since the old kingdom. Yeah, the fishing types. And when we dated the writings in Gosford, we believe it's closer to the late period Greco-Roman era. That
it's
era,
quite possible.
500 maximum, we believe, right?
Yes.
Or in the range
So it's quite
of
possible
500
if you have that many
BC.
boats.
If Thor Heyerdahl was able to cross the ocean with a reed boat, then definitely bigger ships can. Good navigators, people, nobody can deny that the ancient Egyptians knew the star constellations from the very, very ancient times. And we have geology maps. We have a map for the world from 3000 to 100 BC. Definitely, it's not Egypt, just Egypt.
Yes.
But you can see the famous pre-dynastic style of the boat, of the ship in Egypt with the many oars and the different other styles. And people fighting lions on that side. And what looks like horses.
Like North America.
Like North America. And that island on the side that definitely looks like Australia. And then ancient Greece.
As if they give the famous mark to each region.
Yeah.
What they are famous with.
They draw the
African, they put lions. North America, they put horses.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
And what
happened?
supports this, that there are artifacts brought from different countries from the pre-dynastic time, which means, of course, they were traveling. No other
We've seen
explanation.
giraffes, we've seen lions, we've seen
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Elephants. Yeah.
We've seen that piece of lapis lazuli with
Baboons.
gold in the museum. That piece is from the pre-dynastic
Yes,
time.
that's a pre-dynastic piece. It's
Yeah.
just made out of
Gold and lapis
lapis
lazuli.
lazuli.
Yeah.
And it must have come from Afghanistan.
That's what the officials say.
We don't have this, the quarry here. There is no lapis lazuli quarries in Egypt.
So that
So it
was
must
a common
be-
thing. Like you can see also in the New Kingdom time, and we are sure that it's much more ancient than that. But a tomb like the tomb of Rakhmira, he's trading with the people of the north and the people of the south. All the nations, all the different national dresses, all the different anatomy, all the different merchants from the north and the south. It's documented on the walls. Nobody can deny that these ancient civilizations connected all the nations together, especially Egypt.
Back to your question
Yeah, so
about Gosford
what
Glyphs.
happened?
First of all, that our partner in Kemet School, Patricia Awyan, someone sent her the photos of the writings, and she promised them that we're gonna have a look and see, because she heard that everyone is accusing the writings to be fake and a hoax.
Yeah.
And we decided, me and Yousef, from the first time we had a look, and we said, okay, we will not read anything about it. We will be like, this is our first contact. So
Yeah.
because we don't want to be corrupted or to build
Influenced
our
by-
opinion
Yeah.
with somebody else.
Yeah.
So we had a look, and we started to recognize the symbols as individuals, and then as words, and then as sentences.
The data wasn't enough, so Beatrice and Patricia
Went to
went
Australia.
and got as much photos and videos for the entire
They
site.
made their private
And,
collection. They brought, it was very high resolution, so we can zoom it.
Even
very
we
good scale.
together, we didn't study it together.
Each
So
one
we
did
know
the
if we're
work
going to reach
separate.
the same conclusions or not.
Right.
Okay. And till a certain point, we were 75% sure that this is authentic, till we found a symbol, and it doesn't match any symbol we know. It looks ancient Egyptian, but the combination of the symbol, it's unique, and it is not listed in the hieroglyphic dictionaries I have. So we were about to lose hope. Someone actually faked that symbol. Yes, it is actually two symbols creating one. The two symbols separately are listed, but that symbol, that combination is not listed. So this is the end of the line. We said, okay, someone faked this. So I was joining one of the groups of hieroglyphics on Facebook, and I posted that picture to my friends because, and that is actually the benefit of the teamwork. And I told them, guys, do you recognize the symbol? Immediately they said, yes, this is the symbol from the Greco-Roman time, or the end of the Egyptian civilization. And that is the reason how we date the writings, because of that symbol. And you recognize that the symbol M in the Old Kingdom, it's an owl. From the end of the Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom, it's like a geometric shape. Okay, so when I see it, I can say this tomb is not Old Kingdom. That tomb is Middle Kingdom,
or that sign only appeared in that era.
The same. When I found that symbol from the late period, now we can understand that who wrote those glyphs from that era or later on, but not before. Okay.
I want to mention something here. Before that, he gave that symbol because it's not listed in the dictionary to understand the meaning. But he found it first in one of the Greco-Roman temples. And he pointed and he said, that's that glyph that we cannot find in the dictionaries. Here it is, it's on the walls.
Written
so it has to be authentic. But we were looking in the wrong dictionaries. So the dictionaries that we were studying is the one of the classic Old Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. But that era is actually, most of the hieroglyphic in it is sometimes not, the symbols are not meaning the same thing, which was more difficult, of course, for us to translate. But we found really complicated words. Like we know words. Yeah, this word shab
from 6 letters.
Yeah, 6 different signs to make one word.
Luke asked me a question. We were in front of some hieroglyphic text. Can I read all of it? Okay. I said immediately like this, no. I can recognize like maybe from 20 to 50%. But the whole thing, I still need the dictionary. Because I can't memorize all the symbols. It's stuff and the combinations, which can create hundreds of thousands of combinations. So I still need the dictionary.
Thousands of signs. It's not just alphabet.
That is led us that who made the writings could be a real ancient Egyptian or a very talented professor in all the eras of the ancient Egyptian language. And of course, a talented professor will not do that hoax, because we don't have a story about a name or somebody. All the stories about school students, drunk students, some soldiers who did that hoax.
They were not gonna do this. Like some soldiers who've been here in the Middle East and saw glyphs, so they try to imitate. That's not gonna work, because they just gonna remember words that complicated.
You have to have either a really advanced understanding.
Right.
And if it's a professor, he was going to choose the academic style and put very famous formulas, not something in that
he will copy a text
of rare language.
And we didn't find that this text matches any text we know.
No, it's not in any. Even that we have famous stories about sailors who survived. We thought it could be that somebody copied chapter of that story, but no, it's not. It's a different style of writing, rare, and we have horizontal and vertical writings in Gosford. And when it comes to carving it, I realized also that the person who carved it didn't follow the school of what we see here on the professional scribes, which is drawing the symbols and then carving them. We've seen examples of that in the Egyptian Museum of Unfinished Work. But he carved the symbols right away, and that's very, very, very challenging to carve the symbol right away if you are not used. Try to carve English and you'll see how crude that comes out,
Yes.
huh? And you still know the language very well. And the symbols or the letters in English is not as complicated as. So we find like signs. The chick, for example, the square. There is the lower, the back side leg is always have a
bend of the backside of the knee.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
did that.
Yes.
You know, we were starting to see like these kind of things. So it was hard to find because he wrote the chapter. One chapter was
No, I want to
vertical?
explain this
Yeah.
more. So it is someone who is used to write this, not just someone like if I'm gonna write this, I will make it 2 straight legs and like a scratching for the feet. Okay, but if I write Arabic, because I write Arabic or English all the time, especially Arabic because it is wavy writings. In Arabic, we have certain angle and certain wave for each letter. The same like ancient
Yeah.
Egyptian.
Yeah.
So that man who drew the check, he was,
That was
doing
his
this all the
language.
time. So
Yeah.
he made that back side or the bend of the knee. So it proves that that is his
knows,
language,
Yeah.
not just someone.
He knows
copying.
certain curves in the symbols. Without it, it's not that. It's not the symbol. Like another symbol, where that it's assembled with a little bird, but the tail of the bird
Like a
must
sparrow.
Right.
must have like
Specific.
a specific
The
shape,
feather and the tail.
not
yes.
just a bird. So any normal person that was just going to copy something, especially on stone, he was not gonna like do this kind of work. Plus, we translated already the part that was horizontal, no, vertical.
Vertical.
The vertical part was a correct formula of Jid Midu. Remember the Jid Midu? Yeah, it's written. Yeah, so Jid Midu without in. So that was confusing. But when we were looking, now that we dated the writings, we looked around the same writings in that era that we believe the writings is from the similar era, and we found that in some cases Jid Midu
The
without
same
in.
combination. Yes.
Huh? So, oh yes, it's there. Letters that's back to back. You know, it's not all facing the same direction. We found also, and it's an Isis temple. And it's not a mistake.
It's
No,
a design.
it's a style.
Yes.
Yes, it's a style. So more and more things. Then, of course, we looked at the story, the bigger text. So we chose one of the walls because it's a lot, and it's there is lots of symbols, and probably some chapters are not connected, but more than one. And we have to put in mind that he's not a professional scribe. He's a sailor. And back in these days, to know how to read and write, that was something, not everybody could do.
Not easy.
Yeah, until not long time
So
ago.
he wrote his name, he wrote his profession, and he
Yeah.
wrote the story, and that is the most interesting part of
Yeah.
this, that he was talking about expedition, and he wrote the name of the captain. Okay, they call him the chief captain, or the chief of. So we can make differences between the chief of the expedition, let's say like a mayor or like a royal relative, and then the captain of the fleet. Okay, so he wrote the name of the captain of the fleet, and he was talking about the fleet coming back to Egypt from Australia. Actually, they didn't mention the names in a very clear way, but this is how we understand the writings, that they were leaving and heading north.
Yeah.
Okay,
To
and then a
return.
kind of a very strong storm or like a
Yeah.
tsunami happened, so they had to return back to the place, which is Australia, and they call it Benu land, BNU, Benu land. Okay, and they had to return back. In their journey back, the very strong
Rainstorm,
waves
yeah.
happened, rainstorm and waves,
Yeah.
and the ships were
Capsized.
hiked and upside down and were destroyed.
Yeah.
Okay, and it seemed that him and the captain are survivors. Maybe a priest. We found that there is a priest also listed. And in the future, we're gonna continue translating the whole thing, so we will come up with the whole story.
Yeah, that chapter that we translated is in YouTube videos, and we have We have
3 hours. Yes, 3
at
videos
least.
each. One
We
is
have,
1
yeah,
hour.
we have 3 parts. So in the beginning, we had to prove how would they travel and all this stuff. But if somebody wants to see the translation, is in part 3.
Part 2 and part 3.
Yeah.
Analysis
part 2
of
is the
Gosford
gathering of the
glyphs.
symbols, but part 3 is most and also the rest of, inshallah, we're gonna have time. But the fact that they say professionals looked at these writings and they said it means nothing, that proves that it's authentic. Because it meant something, and we both understood it, and we put it down in the documentary that we did about it, with every word and its codes in the dictionary. This word is made out of these 3 symbols, for example, and these 3 symbols are this code and that code. Nobody can deny what the work we did, if they really want to know. But how would they travel, and how would they, this is we already said how did they travel. And the boomerangs, for example. How come Egyptians and Australians have boomerangs, and why we call it the foreigner's weapon?
And by saying that the sailor who made it, no, of course we didn't imagine this because of the writings. Okay, so we answered another question that maybe the grammatic structure will not be so perfect.
Yeah.
And who will do this? If I call anybody from any nation, write a text for me or a story, the grammar from Egypt, from United States, from France, everyone with his own language, he will not give me a grammar structure in a very good way. Okay, so as Yousef said, that someone be able, a sailor, and that is the and we understand that the Egyptian studies or the Egyptian education used to happen through the temple. It was as a religious education first, and from being a priest, they will be study different subjects. Okay, so most of the, or maybe all of the writings in the Egyptian temples and the tombs done by whom? By the professional scribes. So no way to compare between the Gosford glyphs writings, or the glyphs of Gosford, and the glyphs in the Egyptian temples.
Yeah.
This done by a sailor in a random shape, and the one was in a different, maybe emotional case, and the professional scribes who wrote.
We know that they make the horizontal and vertical lines.
They have time
to
of
lay
course,
everything
the right
perfectly
tools.
and everything like that. But when it comes to crude writings, we also found lots of crude writings that like very similar to what you find in Gosford. We found also hieroglyphic graffiti, especially there is one especially that actually it's a match for Gosford, and this one is in the chapel or in the
Sekhmet?
Sekhmet, remember? That Petah, there is a figure of Petah
In Karnak temple,
Karnak
when you go
temple.
to Sekhmet,
He has no head.
yes, but,
No, but
not
not the
inside the shrine. It's outside on
one
the left
local
wall.
carved that on the wall
Yes.
at once.
Because in Gosford there is a kind of, if I can call it, like cartoon character of Betah, with a big belly,
Yes.
and his hands comes out. When we see it, we understand what it is. But some people maybe think that this is a funny shape of Betah. At that chapel we are talking about, the same shape is, or Betah was represented in that style again.
We're not exaggerating.
Yeah,
The same.
copy of it.
So as if you're looking, and it's as crude as the one in Gosford actually, and it's almost on the same type of sand, poor sandstone. So it also survived for at least from 300, 400 BC. Yeah.
The same timeline.
Yeah.
Have
It
to
matches
go,
the-
my friends.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I know it's gonna
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna
So-
keep grilling Yousef for a little while.
Okay.
Thank
I have to go too.
Well, I want
No,
to
no,
talk about
but
the
I-
Serapeum though.
Yeah.
We got that on the. We did get him.
But
talking about
there
that
is
a little bit. Well, we had.
there is a point also. We cannot just end. So now, as we can see, we share the more question marks than answers. Inheritance is a very common thing. Inheritance happens throughout the ages in all the eras we know. And there is a possibility, without a doubt, that there are more layers in the past that could be also what we think is the era that built is nothing but another layer of inheritors that came and settled in these eras. So how come, where are the original builders then? What happened? And the story that also worthy of research is that a possible cataclysm happened that destroyed these civilizations. Natural disaster. It can be meteor, it can be plasma event from the sun, whatever
I'm
the
familiar with the flood, with the Great Flood.
the flood is definitely a result. It can be a result from also a meteor or a plasma event.
Yes.
In any case, there will be lots of floods. So people would have to go and take the caves as shelters and then depend on survival mode until. Anyway, we have a story talks about a cataclysm or event that happened that was about to annihilate mankind, and this is official documented in hieroglyphics, and it's about also what seems to be also activity from the sun, because it's about the sun god Ra and Sekhmet, which is known in some of the textbook as the destructive power of the sun. The second thing, in a hurry because Muhammad needs to leave. The second thing that we know, and of course that name is going to be, I don't like to use the name, but I have to. Atlantis. We know about Atlantis from the Solon and the Plato. So where did they get the story from?
How do they know?
How did they?
From the Egyptian priests.
From the Egyptian priests. So the Egyptian priests were passing a story that there was once an ancient advanced civilization.
And disappeared.
Yeah.
And that is the truth about Atlantis. So every story,
Everything else is-
it's an addition to that one. He
Everything
said,
else is copper chisels.
Exactly.
So yeah, the ancient Egyptian priest talked of an ancient advanced civilization, and they passed this down to the Greek philosophers such as Solon and Plato. So the roots of ancient advanced civilization, the story was being mentioned in the dynastic time. We cannot ignore that.
Thank you guys so much, especially during Ramadan.
And
you guys have been great.
After breakfast, we talk more.
Yes.
We have to go eat again before fast.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! It's one.
apologies, sorry.